Hi, Misha here, and after doing a couple of firearms videos on the personal channel, let's return to some nerdery and talk about the Imperial Stormtrooper and variants. We already looked at the clone troopers, and the Stormtrooper is the direct successor immediately following the Clone Wars, and in fact, clones made up the first Stormtroopers. So I think I've got roughly a dozen different Black Series 6-inch model toys here of different Stormtrooper flavors, although most of them are on the same basic body with different accessories. So, you know me, talk a little about history, equipment, things of that general nature. Let's begin with the most bog standard Stormtrooper that I have. Don't worry, I actually did pick up a stand to put these on so we can use the spinny thingy. Don't have it for this video, but we'll have it for the next one. Like I said, these started off as the clones. The remaining clones after Order 66 were reorganized and turned into Stormtroopers by 18 or even 19 BBY. But soon they would be used to train conscripts and volunteers to fill the Stormtrooper ranks. Originally they were actually called TK troopers. And I'll talk about the transitional period and some of the unique variants in a different video. I decided to focus on the main Stormtroopers here. But the clones were considered better fighters, but they were also very expensive. Who would have thunk growing and raising and training and equipping and supporting people their entire lives? Yeah, that's expensive. It's much cheaper to recruit someone when they're 17 or 18, 19, and only train them for 3 or 4 years. And even if the Stormtroopers weren't as effective, this is peacetime, and they would mostly be called upon for police actions and population control, not fighting an army. So different needs, different times. So over about a 10-year period, as the clones aged out of service, they would be replaced by conscripts, the average old Stormtrooper. And in the beginning, Stormtroopers would use Phase 2 clone armor, but soon this would be replaced by Stormtrooper armor, which was still very much based on it. It has 18 plasteel plastoid plates with a body glove underneath and a multi-layer helmet on top. The body glove is good at protecting the body from vacuum in harsh environments for a short period of time. It even has a small air reserve, and it can even act as a pressure tourniquet to control bleeding if injured. The outer plates, they can disperse blaster bolts, but they're not as really meant for that like the clone armor. They're more for dispersing stun bolts and kinetic impacts, rocks, well, unless you're against teddy bears, and more traditional firearms, slug throwers as they call them. It's also designed to kind of protect the wearer from the environment better. It has air filters, it's NBC protected, nuclear, biological, chemical protected, even some limited radiation protection. Because again, more of a policing action. And the helmet has audio sensors and polarized lenses, other things like that. And it is more comfortable, and it was easier to mass produce, but it was actually still said to be of high quality. Now, it has a utility belt, and it has spare packs for the blasters on it. It has rations, water packs, even a couple of emergency medical packs. Even has wrist binders for arresting people. And then it has this big cylinder over the butt I'm sure, as you know, this originally was supposed to be a lightsaber case back when Stormtroopers themselves were to carry lightsabers and shields. But once that was dropped, this became a thermal detonator case. So there you go. And the standard armor just has a tiny little backpack on it, which has a power cell and emergency air. But of course, this is just the basic guy here, and he has his basic. This toy has its basic E11 blaster. We'll talk about blasters later on. This is how he is, standard little conscript guy. Moving here, we have a Stormtrooper commander. And this is an older Black series. The one we just had is a newer one. This is called the newer body. This is the older body. There's pros and cons to each, although most seem to prefer the new. It does have a storage spot for his E11 there, a little scabbard. And he comes with a DLT-20A blaster rifle. And is otherwise the same. Basically, Stormtrooper commanders were not only commanders, they were actually the more experienced, well-trained, more elite and capable. So they had slightly better equipment, and they were given higher command positions. I just picked him up because I thought it'd be neat to have one of the older bodies. And there are differences in things like the helmets between the old and the new. But then again, even looking at the films, the props for the helmets changed a lot. So it's not exactly wrong. Also, these pauldrons on the shoulders can denote rank or specialty. They're color coded for your enjoyment. Next up, we have the Jedha Patrol Trooper. He's still a Stormtrooper, seen in Rogue One. He's carrying the DLT-19 long-ranged blaster rifle. Even has a little folded up bipod. His armor is basically the same, but he's carrying this big honking backpack. Now, it doesn't take much imagination to realize part of it is communication because of this giant antenna. It's an encrypted communication system. The backpack can also carry extra rations, of course, extra blaster power packs, and one neat feature, I think, is that it actually can act to recharge the power cells of the suit. In fact, it's good for 240 hours of total power. So if it is a long time patrol, it's got nearly a week and a half of energy in it, which when you're in an energy universe makes a lot of sense. You could even recharge things. So yeah, this is a long-range foot patrol trooper, and a neat, relatively recent addition to the line. He has a pauldron here, removable backpack, this larger rifle, which we actually end up getting quite a bit. It's a lot of repeats of the same guns, but then again, that's kind of how props work. So these are kind of your basic Stormtrooper guys. You know, slightly different outfits. But even with the original movies, we started to see specialized variants. So let's talk about these next. We first meet the standard Stormtroopers at the beginning of the first film on board the Tantive 4. But soon we go to Tatooine and we meet the Luxor droids, the Desert Stormtroopers, aka the Sand Troopers. And this is a variant, although not a lot different. Their body glove is specialized to cool the trooper, as you'd imagine, and the outer shell and plates have a reflective surface to try to not absorb heat. There's a few detail differences, like the knee pad's different, the front armor and the back armor is different, and they don't have a thermal detonator over their butt, because instead they have a giant backpack as standard equipment. This is basically a survival backpack. It has several liters of water, extra rations, and it has a vapor condenser It has a long-range comm gear. It even has an emergency shelter. So, yeah. The rest of their outfit is basically just tempered against the sand and dust and whatnot of a desert. And like most Stormtroopers, they were commonly armed with the E11 blaster, although they could have larger guns like the DLT-19 or the T-21 or the RT-97. This guy actually does come with a DLT-19, but I gave it to a different trooper because he already has his E11, which is relatively small, and then this big honking gun on his back. I thought that was enough. He already looks pretty saddled. Hope that cooling gear is working well. Yeah, these weren't really considered elite, but I'm sure people that passed the Sand Trooper trials were at least respected for making it. I don't think walking through a desert carrying lots of armor and equipment sounds particularly fun. But it's a neat part of Star Wars. And of course, in universe, they were used on several planets, and it just goes to show how they adapt the uniform and how it's actually quite modular. Something that it takes on from Phase 2 Clone Trooper armor, because it too is designed to be modular for various environments. So let's go from the heat to the cold. The Arctic Assault Stormtrooper, the Cold Weather Assault Stormtrooper, or as we know and love him, the Snow Trooper. He has kind of a medium-sized backpack, and it's there for emergency power. It actually has quite a bit of power, up to 2 weeks, to keep his suit warm, and a few other emergency things like a flare. He has this cape, insulated cape. His underbody glove is white, and of course is designed primarily to keep him warm. It's also quite airtight to keep body heat in. He has this hood over his helmet and a heated breathing system, so he's not, sucking in cold air. Probably a good thing. And these are considered elite. The Blizzard Force that attacked Echo Base on Hoth were considered amongst the best. By the way, he has faux leather boots that are designed to be stable on icy, snowy terrain. And he carries pretty much the standard loadout optimized for the cold. Light snowtroopers typically had E11s. Heavy snowtroopers had larger guns like this. Again, this is the DLT-20. They also could have the T-21. And some officers would carry the SE-14 pistol. These are actually based on the Clone Wars era clone Arctic assault units, so they too can trace their lineage directly to the clones. And in the real world, of course, we had the snowtroopers in Empire Strikes Back, and we had a toy from Kenner back then. And it's just kind of part of Star Wars lore. I've always kind of wondered, what good is a cape on the outside of armor in the cold? I can't imagine it really keeps much heat in, but I could be wrong. So we've done hot and cold. Now let's go to the sky. Here we have the Air Assault Trooper, or Air Trooper, also known as the Jump Trooper, sometimes a little bit erroneously called a Jet Trooper. And his place in Star Wars canon is quite interesting. The idea of a flying Stormtrooper, in fact, did not start with J.J. Abrams, believe it or not. It actually dates back to 1993 and the Super Nintendo video game of Empire Strikes Back, where they were air troopers. Logical. And they would appear in other video games, including The Force Unleashed. And they were finally made canon by Rebels. In fact, that's what this figure is the trooper from Rebels. You can tell him because he has hoses running from the front to his backpack. Some earlier troopers actually have more like a TIE fighter or clone pilot style, where there's a box on their front, and on the back we have like a Mandalorian looking jetpack. This is more of a jump pack though. The jetpack, well, it's a jetpack of jets. Jump packs are meant for short duration hops, 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds at a time. Because the idea is to get around really rough terrain and hospital terrain to, you know, jump over obstacles. Or maybe jump in or out of vehicles that are in low orbit. They pretty much are armed with whatever they need. This figure only comes with his E11 and the scabbard. Makes sense. You want to go kind of light. But I gave him an SE-14 blaster pistol. I don't know, when I was setting up to do this video. I felt like he needed to. But I do like him. It would make sense. They're also, of course, able to operate in vacuums, 0G. It's said, apocrypha maybe, that these were stationed to provide external security to the Death Star during A New Hope. But they mostly have standard armor, and they're a standard Stormtrooper. They have enlarged shoulder pads for a little bit of protection. They have the new helmet and the new backpack, and some of them can carry rocket launchers and other ordnance launchers, because these were assault troops, basically air to ground, and they were designed to take fortifications that were otherwise considered inaccessible. But yeah, its place in canon is quite interesting. But it started off for years languishing in video games. So those are kind of the pretty standard Stormtroopers. Now we'll go to the top row and talk about some of the more colorful variants. Next we come to one that's a lot of people's favorite, and one I really like too. And I actually did have the figure of this as a kid. Return of the Jedi gave us the Scout Trooper, often called the Biker Scout, because we saw these both on their 74Z speeders. The original toy would explode apart. It was actually pretty cool because it was a lot of metal, and it was a cool toy. Came with this dude. We also see them on Endor walking around on foot. These are interesting guys, and they're kind of considered one of the elite special units in the Stormtrooper Corps. And they have a few different roles. Hello. They, of course, do scouting reconnaissance. They also can be sent on sabotage missions. And a sub-variant known as the Sniper Scout, or Scout Sniper, does exactly what you'd expect snipers to do. They also can gather intelligence on an enemy, and are often stationed for defense and just guard duty, and often in more rural or wilderness environments, because that's their specialty. They are trained to operate for days or even weeks at a time, living off the land, and operate either solo or in small groups of 2 to 4. They can operate in larger companies if they need to, but yeah, by their nature, they're a small group. They're basically stormtrooper survivalists, living off the land, doing the things, working deep behind lines, kind of Navy SEAL-ish. So they are relatively lightly armed and armored. In fact, really only the chest and head have armor plating. The rest is just a bodysuit. So not a lot of protection for the limbs, but on the other hand, it's light and doesn't encumber them. And their standard issue weapon is the EC-17 blaster pistol down here in this little ankle holster, often called the holdout blaster. And that's all that this figure comes with. Either the biker version, I don't have this one with the 74Z speeder, I have the archive one here. But I gave him the DLT-19. I believe this was the one that came from the... No, I don't think this is one that came from the Stormtrooper. I think it came from someone else. But since they did carry the DLT-19 as well as the DL-19X targeting, the sniper version, or the E11X sniper, and sometimes the older E4. Small, lightweight guns, long range. Yeah. They had enhanced communications gear built into their helmet. They had image magnification, essentially binoculars built in to this enlarged plate. And unlike a normal Stormtrooper helmet, they could actually open their visor. They had a utility belt with rations and usually grenades, sometimes laser trip mines, cord, survival gear on it. And they have this medium-sized backpack. It's mostly a power cell, which can last for quite some time, but it also does contain down lower a camouflaged emergency shelter, as well as additional rations and energy packs for their weapon. But they were mostly expected to forage off the land as possible and operate for 2 to 3 weeks sometimes. Interesting group of guys here, and it's said that in the Empire they kind of developed a bit of an ego because of their survivalism. They thought they were a little tougher and smarter than a lot of other Imperials, not to mention rebels. We see from Return of the Jedi that they don't think highly of rebels. On the other hand, Ewoks don't think highly of them. You know, when I was a teenager, I had a cat named Ewok. So, yeah, the Scout Trooper, he is pretty nifty. And he has a counterpart over here. Meet the Patrol Trooper. Officially, these are part of the Scout Corps, which is part of the overall Stormtrooper Corps. Whereas the standard Scout Trooper is meant to operate mostly in more rural environments, these are mostly meant to operate in more urban environments, sprawls, cities. And they too ride speeders, but a different type, meant for urban use. And they're not really meant for long-term missions, just, day missions. The truth is, this is a glorified traffic cop. He has a little bit different of a helmet, and it has less visual enhancing going on and more communications to, communicate with the station, the police station. He's also lightly armored, and he carries an EC-17, although this mold is a little different with an additional bit we'll talk about. And on top of that, he carries a stun baton on this side. That's pretty neat. Again, mostly a police officer. Or maybe more like an MP. I think that'd be a military police, but he would definitely go after civilians. So he's the urban version. Of course, we didn't have him in the 80s when we had this guy. He was added to the canon in 2018 with Solo, but he actually fits in just fine. And is a pretty nifty figure. I didn't think I would like him necessarily, but I do. He's simple. He has 2 accessories that goes on his belt. My only thing is because of the pistol, he has to kind of bow arm it a bit. I kind of wish the holster was kind of a drop holster, so yeah. But yeah, we have a Stormtrooper cop, because that's a great notion. But of course, any movie about Solo would involve police. Hello. Yeah. And keeping on with the theme, we have our next trooper. I'm going to warn you right now, for the next 2, my personal opinion kind of goes against the general internet grain. Anywho, we have the Range Trooper, part of the Range Trooper Corps, or Range Corps, a subdivision of the Stormtrooper Corps. And this design, this ranking, had its genesis in the Empire, who realized that a lot of frontier planets far away from Coruscant. They had a high chance of lawlessness or even giving in and siding with the rebellion. So they needed a special group, a special corps to station there to prevent this, hence the range. It started with selecting the more experienced and the most loyal stormtroopers, then giving them more indoctrination or conditioning and additional training. And then they're sent out to the frontier. These are basically like, Texas Rangers. They were expected to operate without direct orders, and they were expected to make do with the same gear and not get a lot of the newer updates and resupply and support. So they were given not the newest gear, but the more durable, reliable, sturdy gear that they themselves could repair, and it kind of shows in this chunky guy. And they mostly seem to be geared towards operating in harsh/cold environs, mountains, ice planets, asteroids, moons, and it shows. There's a lot in common with the Snowtrooper, including kind of the chest armor, having a different style but still a winter coat with fur on it. That's a little weird, but okay. And the helmet is kind of a blending of a Snowtrooper helmet and others. And it has these giant boots. They're almost like overshoes, like ski shoes. These are to give traction on slippery slopes, on mountains, and they can be magnetized to stick to, metal, because that's what being magnetized does. As we see these introduced in the Solo movie, as they clomp across a train moving about 90 kilometers per hour. And they are very big. Very big booties. Not that kind of booty, the other kind of booty. Bonk, 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 bonk. And this rubber coat is very thick. We've got some pouches here. We've got a relatively small backpack in the back. He doesn't have a lot of sophisticated gear, just dependable gear, solid gear, good dependable armor. And he has an E10R blaster. This was the forerunner, the predecessor to the E11, so it's an older design. Now the original E10 was not known for great reliability, but the R variant was simplified and kind of bulked up, and so they use it. And it is a little bigger than an E11, a little more capable when it works right. Yeah, just all of his stuff is big and bulky and meant to last. And these guys are kind of getting to that point where there's a lot of arrogance involved. They kind of consider the other stormtroopers to be weaklings. These are the chads. Let's just be honest. These are the chads of the stormtrooper corps. If these are like your survivalists, your scout troopers, these are the chads. So our range trooper here, we don't really know a lot about him though. So we've done jungles, forests, we've done urban environments, we've done cold mountains. Let's go to the tropics with the Coastal Defense Stormtrooper, or the Coastal Guard, or the Shore Trooper, or if you prefer, the Scarif Stormtrooper. If you can't tell, he is a kind of, again, based on the Scout Trooper with the exposed legs, not armored. And he's meant for tropical, moist environments. And he has kind of a unique helmet that's a blend of Scout and regular Trooper. Now he actually comes with a E11, but I gave him an E22 from a different figure because the Shore Troopers do carry the E22, and thought it was neat to give him a two-gripped, two-handed gun. It's kind of a neat gun. It's a double-barreled reciprocating gun blaster, more of a heavy repeater. Since he operates pretty close to home, he doesn't have a lot of gear to live on his own for days at a time. Interestingly, he has this ammo pouch on him that's actually He looks like a Sten gun pouch from World War II, maybe the Cold War. What's kind of neat, though, about the Coastal Defense Troopers, this wasn't a permanent assignment. Most all of these other Stormtroopers, it was kind of your division. Once you were put in it, once you did it, you stuck to it. This was a rotating assignment because not very many planets needed this type of trooper. We saw them on Scarif. They were also stationed on Mon Cala and a few other places, including the more watery parts of Yavin 4. But it was actually a temporary duty assignment, and typically only higher ranked, more experienced Stormtroopers got it, say sergeants and above. And they often kind of served as leaders for more standard Stormtrooper groups. So it almost seems like it was kind of a reward assignment. I mean, they fought, they were soldiers, but, you know, wearing light armor and being stationed on a beach or tropical area, well, it beats being one of these guys, or dealing with a bunch of rebel scum in the city like one of these guys. So, yeah, kind of neat. I think he does work out well with this E-22. I really like this gun. I wish more figures would come with it. Now, like I was saying, I'm going to disagree with the internet a bit. A lot of people who do videos on the Black Series, they love the Shore Trooper. And the Range Trooper doesn't really get a lot of love. I get it, I really do. This is a goofy looking figure, and this is just a good trooper. That said, if I can only have one, I'd probably get the Range Trooper. He's so weird and different. I like the rubber coat, I like the big booties, and I like the fact that he comes with the all-new blaster. The only thing I really don't like is the fur. I could have done without the fake fur around his neck. Whereas this guy, he just comes with the standard E11, and that's it. I think if he came with some more stuff, or, I don't know, stood out from the crowd, I can't say exactly I'm let down by him, just maybe a little underwhelmed. Either way, just my kind of hot take there. I like both. They're neat. But this is one of the rarest Stormtroopers in the galaxy, and so I almost didn't add him to the collection, but I found him for a good price, about $16, so why not? And with that, we'll start to wrap things up with our finalists. So we're in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, with very good faster-than-light travel, Bacta is amazing medicine, and space wizards. And yet our next and last two units are straight out of Earth World War II. And we begin with the Incinerator Trooper. And we're also kind of back where we began. This is a standard Stormtrooper armor set, just with the pauldron, to denote that he likes burning things. Yeah, this is a flame trooper. In fact, there have been various flame troopers within Star Wars for a very long time. This is just the latest one from The Mandalorian. This is another one I wasn't necessarily going to pick up until I found a really good deal on it. And we have a very giant flamethrower connected with two hoses to an upside-down backpack. But I have to admit, I kind of like the backpack in this orientation, so I don't blame him. Also, it kind of reminds me of scuba tanks. But, yeah, he's got pretty much standard armor, except it has a special non-flammable, heat-resistant treatment because, well, he burns things for a living. And these are considered very respected and, frankly, I'm sure very feared people because this is an up-close and personal job of literally burning people to death. That's a hardcore person. But we see this introduced in Mandalorian Season 1. And it's a neat figure. It also has the quote-unquote flame effect that plugs in to the end of the flamethrower. Doesn't really do me much good. The other thing is, I wish you could lock the flamethrower to the backpack, kind of like on the heavy Mandalorian. You can lock his big blaster to his pack, freeing his hands up. I think that'd be a neat feature, because otherwise he doesn't really come with anything else. No pistol, no backup gun. You'd think with a flamethrower you would definitely want a backup gun, because typically flamethrowers do not have a ton of fuel. By the way, this is called a D72W. That's the name of this flamethrower, or flamer. But yeah, for the Mandalorian. And we come to our final guy. And this too is just a standard Stormtrooper with a pauldron. And at least he does come with an E11 blaster, but that's his secondary gun. His primary is this. This is the artillery trooper, or the shell trooper, or the mortar trooper. And it really is a mortar tube. It does have an articulated bipod, but more impressively, it has an articulated base, and it actually can rotate in pretty much all directions. It's on a ball joint. And you can even drop mortar shells in the tube if you choose. And his backpack comes with them, so you can pull these out and drop them in and make bloop noises. Kind of reminds me of those little green army men I had as a kid. There was always a mortar man in those packs. But yeah, he has several different types of shells, mortars. Yeah, very current technology there. By the way, if anyone's still listening and knows, how do you hook the gun on the backpack? I have not been able to figure it out. I know you can, I just don't know how. But this was one I wanted, but my leg's a little bowed there. But for a while he was really expensive, and then I found what was frankly a good deal. He's kind of not a deluxe figure, but I think he was exclusive to Amazon and has so many goodies that a little pricier, like $35. I've seen some places asking 60 and up. I think Amazon wants 70 for him now, and I'm not doing that. So you can tell that Moff Gideon's Imperial remnant might be falling on hard times because he's resorting to World War II tactics, flamethrowers and mortarmen. And he's from season 2 of The Mandalorian. Neat figure though, but pretty much just like the Stormtroopers we started with. Before we completely wrap things up, as I promised, let's kind of quickly go over the various guns and blasters and whatnot. Maybe one day I'll actually do a close look at the blasters and the real world guns that they were based on over on the Mishaco channel. But just for now, like I said, this is the E10. This is classed as a medium blaster, and it replaced the DC-15S, the carbine version, very soon after the Clone Wars were over. The original E10 was known to get kind of jammed up in harsh environments and wasn't always very reliable, although the E10R here seems to have addressed several of those issues. I'm not really aware of any real-world inspiration other than just a scaled-up E11 for solo, because by that time, they weren't really using a lot of guns. It does have an optic, it does have a ordnance launcher, and it was, pretty standard gun. Moving over to our Scout Trooper, this is the DLT-19. This was considered quite a powerful and a very long-ranged gun, and it's more of a replacement for the Clone Wars era DC-15A, the long blaster. This was intended to take out long-range targets, groups of infantry, even light air speeders, whatnot. And I'm not entirely sure what this is completely based on, other than just a hodgepodge of rifle components. It's very modern rifle-esque. Here's his little EC-17 holdout blaster. This replaced the DC-17, and it has a very compact gas cylinder. It's actually considered very powerful for its size, but also of only short to maybe medium range. Oddly, it seems to, in universe, have the trigger as more of a squeeze button on the side for use with gloves. In the real world, that's a really not great idea. It can have accessories attached, like a glow rod, glow stick, which actually the one that comes with the patrol trooper does have. And now we move along to our kind of standard guns, but let's do this one first. This is the DLT-20 or 20A. This is kind of the common Stormtrooper blaster rifle, considered much heavier than the E11. It has an optic as standard, and it's quite powerful. The action is somewhat based on MP44 Sturmgewehr, although things like the buttstock were made in-house. And the barrel has a sleeve taken from a Browning, and it has this kind of unique muzzle brake on the end. But this is what the Stormtroopers would often use when they needed something heavier hitting. So the 19 was for more long range, and this is for more close but heavier hitting fire. But the E11 here, this was the standard. And in fact, the Empire, this was just called the Imperial Standard Issue, or the Stormtrooper gun. In fact, the Empire needed so many that Blastech authorized other major firms to make these on their behest under license. It's considered a medium blaster. It replaced the E10. It was considered quite accurate up to medium ranges. It had a pretty good lifespan. It had a folding / adjustable stock. It could take accessories, and it had a 2-power optic as standard that had a wireless connection with the helmet. And of course, in the real world, as is very famously known, they used Sterling Mark IV or L2A3 guns, pretty lightly modified, all things considered. The scope was from a Sherman tank from World War II. In the film, at least that was for A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. By the time of Return of the Jedi, actually they either used replica props of the E11 itself or Canadian C1s instead. Kind of interesting. And moving along, this guy is actually holding one of the newer molds in the Black Series. It has an E11, but it has a device on the side. I believe it's considered a glow stick. It may be an ordnance launcher or a laser designator, but it does show you that it can be accessorized. Moving right along, even though this figure didn't come with this blaster, this is the SE-14R. This is pretty much the standard full-size Imperial pistol used by officers and what have you. Has a detachable optic. To me, it reminds me of a broom-handled Mauser, but whereas Hans is modified in one way, this was modified in another. But since some Stormtroopers, especially specialists and commanders, did use it, I figured we'd mention it here. Very standard, small, short-range blaster. And moving over, we come to the gun sling across the shoulders of our Sand Trooper. This is a T-21 heavy repeating blaster. It doesn't have a lot of power on its own, but it can deliver very powerful shots, punching through a lot of armor, even vehicles. But once it's hooked up to a generator, it can pretty much go all day long, assuming it doesn't overheat. And the model used in A New Hope is based on a Lewis machine gun, just with things like the drum magazine removed. And then we end with the E22, which, kind of like the E10 we started with, isn't really based on anything specific, just a general Star Wars aesthetic. It's a double-barreled, oscillating version of the E11, carried by Stormtroopers and Mud Troopers and Shore Troopers, and that's about it. It's kind of a, heavier version, but not as heavy as the T21 or even the DLTs. Kind of in between. Yeah, so those are our ordnance. Plus, of course, they usually carried thermal detonators or grenades and other types of destructive devices. So, NFA Class 3. So, there's an overview of Stormtroopers and most of the variants thereof. We looked at clones, we looked at these. We'll look at the transitional models like the Elite Troopers, the Purge Troopers, another time. This was enough for me today, and probably for you too. But yeah, they're pretty neat. I mean, some of them are very similar, but others, like the Range Trooper or the Scout Trooper, literally break the mold. But the Artillery and the Incinerator Trooper are standard. I do like I think the reason I like the trooper types and not the individual character types is because I'm more interested in the equipment, the hardware, just kind of how I am. But which ones do you like the best or hate? They're pretty different. I'm pretty attracted to the Snow Trooper or the Scout Trooper, but the Jedha Patrol and the Sand Trooper are neat for just how much accoutrement they come with. And then I have this sneaking appreciation for the Range Trooper too. They almost all have something that really kind of attracts me, even the ones that are just bog standard. Sometimes it's nice just to have a bog standard something. I'd have to say one of my favorites, though, is the Jump Trooper. I just like the look of it. And it's simple, but not too simple, so probably amongst my favorites. Anyone knows how to tell me how to put the blaster on the backpack of the Artillery? I know it can be done, but I'm missing something. Not literally missing, but yeah, I'm not understanding something. It's not like I can just look up pictures after all. Anyway, appreciate you hanging out with me. And feel free to comment below. This is Misha. Catch you very soon.